Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with a story in which our OP had to deal with a horrible visitor at the hotel. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. When the service charge becomes the "you're an a-hole" charge. I was the server for evening room service at a smallish hotel when I was in my early 20s. Our hotel had a contract with one of the airlines, so we often had their pilots and attendants stay for layovers. They were often a bit of a challenging breed, frequently unfriendly, sometimes outright rude as hell, demanding, and painfully stingy, despite the fact that they always got a decent per diem during these layovers. I was always friendly, though, because not all of them were crappy, and I had to cut them some slack because being a pilot, or especially a flight attendant, could be a really crappy and draining job most of the time. One evening, a pilot calls down to order something to eat, but first he wants me to itemize out the bill for him over the phone for the items he's ordering, which isn't unheard of. Some hotels tack on outrageous surprise fees to the bills. I rattle off his items and prices, and then, so your food subtotal is $25 plus the $2.25 delivery fee and the 20% service charge. He stops me. My menu says the delivery fee is $2. He was right, and I knew it, but my manager had told me to just ignore the discrepancy and always go with whatever the computer said, so I feigned ignorance and gave him a genuine apology for the mistake on the menu. I told him that I wish I could change the fee for him, but unfortunately the system prohibits me from changing fees or prices on the order entry computer. He starts totally flipping out. I told him that I'd have the front desk credit 25 cents to his overall bill to cover the charge error, but he's still yelling at me, insisting that we match our charges to the menu, and it's fraud and illegal for us to charge him something different than what's printed on the menu. I offered to bring him a quarter out of my own wallet on delivery with my apologies because I couldn't fix it any other way, and wasn't even a jerk when I made the offer. But he would have none of it. He demanded that the computer system charge him everything exactly as it's printed on the menu. He told me to call back when I figured out how to fix it and hung up. I was talking to the chef about it after the call, and the chef reminded me that our manager had enlisted me to program some new menu items into the computer a while back, and the admin passwords were taped to the monitor on the back office computer that controls our order system. I was then actually able to go to the office and change the delivery fee to $2. But I also knew that while the menus in guest rooms listed the delivery charge as $2 when it was really $2.25, it also listed the service charge as 25% when the computer actually only charged 20%. So I changed the service charge to 25%. I wouldn't want to commit fraud after all, right? I called the pilot back, told him I found a solution that corrected the delivery fee. He smugly agrees to let us make the order for him now. I take the food up to the room and give him his bill. I'm sorry again about the mistake earlier. I made sure now that everything on the bill matches the menu exactly. He skims the bill and signs it with a smile of smug self-satisfaction, like a man who just righted a major injustice, not just for himself, but for every future guest in the hotel. He got exactly what he asked for, a bill that matched the menu, and it saved him 25 cents on the delivery fee. But he also paid 5 times that much for the increased service charge percentage, and best of all, in our hotel, the service charges went right to the server's paycheck, straight to my paycheck as a tip. I really wish you would have explained to him that important detail as well. Would have made the story so much more satisfying. And our second story. Want to be a loud, annoying a-hole at the airport? It's okay. I'll be sweet to you. So last week, I arrived at LaGuardia ready to board my flight at 3 p.m. Unfortunately, due to the harsh weather, it was delayed until 4 p.m. No biggie, I thought. I had a good book in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. What better way to pass the time? Unfortunately for me, there were absolutely no seats available in the little waiting area outside my terminal. I walk around for a bit, find another terminal nearby with a few vacant seats. I walk towards this little aisle of seats against the wall. I sit down in one and pop my book open. After reading for a while, this guy in his late 40s, I'll call him D-Bag McD Sr., DMD, sits down at the end of the aisle I'm in and is at first relatively quiet. 10 minutes go by and suddenly I hear, "Well, no! Why should I have to inconvenience myself because you're being lazy?" I look up and see a young man who's standing next to DMD. He had tried to pass through a gap that was at the end of the aisle where DMD was sitting. The gap was large enough for a person to walk through, and a lot of people, myself included, had already passed through it before DMD sat down. However, DMD had determined that this gap was his gap and no one else could walk through. The young man was a little stunned and just responds, "You can't just move your legs for a second?" And DMD shouts, "No, why should I?" All he literally had to do was move his leg a few inches to the left. The young man gives up and goes away. A few more minutes pass by, I return to my book, and suddenly I hear the all-too-familiar "No" rant. 2 women had just been yelled at for the same thing as the young guy had been yelled at minutes before. That was it. I wasn't having any more of his self-entitled little B attitude. He was failing at the basic fundamentals of being a decent human being, and it was completely unjustified. Plus, he was distracting me from the best parts of my book. But the gods of petty revenge saw fit to grace me with a window of opportunity. He suddenly gets up to go ask a question at the information center in the terminal. I quickly grabbed my extra packet of honey that I was going to use to sweeten my coffee and rip it open and pour the honey out onto my napkin. I get up slowly, head to the gap, pretending to go drink some water. As I walk over his bags on the floor, I drop the honey-soaked napkin on top inconspicuously. And step on it a little bit to rub into the zipper. I go to the water fountain nearby, drink some water, and head back to my seat and continue reading. DMD comes back, and the crap storm ensues. "What in the hell is this?" he screamed. I casually look up from my book and respond, "I think someone tripped over your bags earlier as they were walking through the gap between the seats." "Oh man, is that honey? Crap, maybe they were drinking coffee." And our next story. Stop leaving early? Sure thing, boss. Let me start this off by saying I love my job. My boss is decent, and the work itself isn't that bad. I work in the oil industry. Specifically, I run a refinery. 99.9% of the time, I'm monitoring automation, so there isn't a whole lot of actual manual work. We're also unionized with a rather strong union. The problem is that monitoring automation looks very similar to not doing crap, even though it can be mentally intensive. So any new supervisor seeing someone do the job could mistake them for being lazy, especially since the better you are with the automation, the less physical work you have to do. We work with 24-hour coverage split into 4-hour shifts. If a guy's sick or late, the other 2 shifts stay late or come in early and split that missing shift. For the longest time, the guy staying late would get a meal allowance, extra $20, because he wouldn't have had the opportunity to bring extra food for the shift he was covering, and we don't get lunch breaks. We get an extra hour pay every day because providing lunch breaks just isn't feasible with the way we're set up. On our last contract negotiation, the company agreed that any overtime should be paid a meal allowance because guys coming in early probably have to pick something up as well. We've never had a time clock or an official attendance policy or really anything of that nature. If you were scheduled at 8 a.m., you showed up a little before and got your briefing on the happenings of the previous shift. Once the shift before you told you what was going on, they'd leave. Whether it was 7:30 or 8, if you'd be relieved. Whether it was 7:30 or 8, if you'd been relieved, you were free to go. If a guy was a few minutes late one day, which was extremely rare, he'd show up a few minutes earlier the next and everything would even out. Because of the flexibility, we didn't mind showing up a few minutes early to get our briefings. We got a new liaison from corporate about a year ago. He saw all these lazy employees leaving 15 minutes early, but never really noticed that we were coming in 30 minutes early, so he forced through time clocks, even though the union reps told him that that would end up costing the company a lot of money in wages. So now we have time clocks, and we all show up exactly on time. It takes 15 minutes to brief your relief for a shift, so we're all leaving 15 minutes late. This briefing must be done for regulatory compliance, so each employee is getting 1.25 hours of overtime a week minimum and 5 meal allowances a week. We all make an average of $40 an hour. I made an extra $9K extra this year in just 15 minutes a day. Between 50 of us, the company has paid over $400K in overtime and meals since putting in the time clocks. We warned them. And our last story. Disrespect our authority, stand out in the cold in your underwear. I worked for several years as a campus safety officer at a small college. The vast majority of students were respectful and willing to be cooperative when we made contact with them. There was this one kid who was an over-the-top D-bag. He insulted us, insulted our intelligence. We all had degrees. Some of us officers had advanced degrees, claimed we were too stupid to have real jobs. He never followed any of our instructions to turn down his stereo, hand over his alcohol, he was underage, or present his campus ID when required. Just an entitled little P. Halloween comes around and I'm working the midnight shift. It's cold out. We get a call to let a student into his dorm and then his room because he's locked out. When my partner and I arrive, guess who's locked out? Mr. Entitled P. His Halloween costume consists of girls' underwear, bra and panties, and his flip-flops. He had nowhere for his keys. Following our department's rules to the letter, I ask him for his school ID. He doesn't have that either. No pockets in which to carry his wallet. Sorry, Mr. P, I can't open the door unless we can identify who you are and verify that you actually live in this building. No, sir, I can't let you in without your ID. That's our department's rules. No, sir, I don't recognize you. Yes, sir, it certainly is cold out tonight. You have a good evening. This is why you always treat security with the respect they deserve. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.